Do you ever feel you're in a dark place or you're stuck in life and you're not really able to move forward? Maybe it's difficult to get out of bed in the morning, or there's like this accompanying sense of depression that's carried inside of your body and you just feel heavy. I totally understand depression is something that I've personally worked with for a huge part of my life. I've experienced waves of depression coming in and out of it, and sometimes depression comes for a while and it kind of holds me down, and then sometimes the depression lifts kind of just as quickly as it came. And so in this video, I'm just going to talk about a couple of signs of depression, and then also I'm going to talk about maybe ways that we can start working on getting out of the depression as well. First and foremost, I just want to acknowledge that typically for us as men, it can be difficult to seek help, to ask help for others. We've grown up in a culture and perhaps the conditioning that says that as men we need to be completely self-sufficient, that we shouldn't be dependent on or reliant on others, that somehow asking for help is a form of weakness. And I'm really here to challenge that stigma and really to say that seeking help is actually a sign of deep courage, a sign of deep humility as well, to acknowledge that maybe we don't have all the answers and that we might need an external perspective or some support really help us through a difficult time in our life. I think the biggest thing that men typically do in depression is that they will go and isolate themselves. And I think that's one of the most dangerous things that can occur when somebody's in a depressed state. Because I know when I'm by myself and I'm thinking the thoughts that I'm thinking and I'm isolating, that, that's not a safe place to be, especially in a deep state of depression. And so if you're currently going through that, I really do recommend, seeking help in ways that I'll talk about here in this video. But first and foremost, I think something really important to understand is, what is depression? I think Gabor Mate really sort of talks about what depression is quite a bit. And he's a physician out of Canada who's very prominent in just like trauma space and learning to heal. And the way that he describes depression is essentially, as children, we weren't able to express ourselves authentically for whatever reason. Our parents didn't like certain emotions. It wasn't healthy for a child, to express anger. A child has a deep need to connect with their caregivers, and if a child expresses anger, sometimes it pushes the caregivers away, and that threatens the child's very existence. And so instead of expressing anger, the child learns to start stuffing that anger inside. And so the anger no longer comes out. The anger is now directed inward. And so there's an introjection or an inner attack towards one's own self with this anger. And that typically can be what that depression is depression is the depressed emotions inside of us. And so as men, typically we were taught not to feel our emotions as children. We were taught that it's not okay to cry or to be playful, to laugh, to even have bouts of anger can be seen as something that wasn't accepted. And in our society today, anger is one of the only emotions that men are truly kind of allowed to feel, even though obviously violence is very much looked down upon. Anger seems to be one of the expressions that it's okay for men to feel, and I think that's because it kind of provides a sense of power, whereas something like maybe crying or going into one's own grief doesn't seem like it has that same oomph to it, even though there's a tremendous amount of power in being able to feel one's own emotions. And so that's kind of essentially what this thesis here is that depression is the accumulation of unprocessed emotions inside of the body. And so what we're going to do here is kind of talk about a couple steps here. So one of the main points is just recognizing that we have depression in the first place, and not running away from it. That depression is here and it's a visitor, so to speak, very much like Rumi's poem. If you've ever heard, his house poem, and basically depression, one way we could look at it is it's a spirit or an entity that is visiting us, or an emotion or an energy that's here, and it's just doing its thing. And depression is part of the human experience, although it may have and can be a symptom that has, terrible suffering and immense amount of pain. Depression itself is cleaning the body in some way. And there is utility and a use for depression, even though it may completely suck to be depressed. So the first step really there is to kind of just get awareness. You can even get awareness of your body right now, just kind of feeling what's going on with it. And to learn to just breathe and to surrender and to accept. And easier said than done, but that is an incredible first step towards this process. Another thing, especially for us as men, is to talk about it openly. To be able to talk to a trusted friend or a family member. I would recommend somebody maybe who's a little bit more, somebody who you can actually go to, who isn't maybe involved in a whole lot of your social circles, that you can really just kind of open up to. I think that's also what's really important about having a therapist or a coach, is that, they're sort of bound by confidentiality, so that you don't have to worry about anyone finding out or anything that could be, potentially used against you. Not saying that it would, but it can be more safe to just have those spaces to talk with somebody. I really do recommend going into a men's group. I think that that does two things. One, it gets us out of isolation. It gets us into connection, but it gets us to open up and talk about things. I think that that's what's really important, is being able to connect with others around us. And it's interesting, when I'm depressed and I go into a room and share about my depression, or I even hear about somebody else sharing about theirs, all of a sudden I can kind of feel that depression start to lift a little bit. And I know for me, the depression wants to keep me in. It doesn't want me to go do the things that, it doesn't want me to go out to a men's group. The depression doesn't want me to go exercise. It doesn't want me to eat better. It wants me to do the things that might actually lead to more depression, staying inside watching Netflix all day, isolating myself, eating crappy foods to try and comfort myself. All these things are kind of just going to compound that depression mess. But if I can start doing some things to actively get up out of it, I do think going for a quick jog, even if it's 10, 15 minutes, or some exercise, getting sun on my face is a huge way to kind of start just working through some of that depression as well. And then I really do recommend just calling somebody if you can. If there's somebody in your phone right now who you feel you can call, just let them know what's going on. It doesn't have to be a huge conversation or a big ordeal, but just like, hey, I'm just feeling kind of depressed. I wonder if I can just chat with you for 5 to 10 minutes about what's going on. People are more than willing to hold space. If they're not, able to at the moment, then finding a time that does work well for them is a great opportunity and idea for that as well. And then something I really recommend too, especially for starting to crawl out of depression, is to build a routine. I think routine building is one of the most incredible things that, you can do. I think that having that self-discipline in the morning to do a couple of things. I know for myself, I have a couple of self-care practices. I do meditation, I do breath work, I do ice baths, that I typically exercise each day as well. And so all of these features in combination can really help. But one thing as well that a lot of people forget about is just our eating habits. Just eating good, healthy, clean foods can help avoid depression. I know foods like gluten and dairy can actually cause depression. So eating just like clean foods, I really do recommend kind of like some sort of like a paleo diet, just eating foods that are either meats, fruits, or vegetables, to really kind of just help the body stay clean and to help process things. That can be very beneficial. It's just switching up your diet a little bit. All those enzymes and chemicals that are created inside of the body from the foods that we eat. This really is a holistic approach, that there are many different components here, but eating what we eat and how much water we drink can really have a huge effect on our mood as well. And then something also to consider too is just seeking professional help. Like I mentioned, there are professionals like myself or others out there. There are coaches, there are trauma-informed therapists who know how to work with this and are able to just monitor you and make sure you're doing okay, but also even have the ability to just listen, because typically what we need is just to kind of like have somebody help us to understand what this depression is and how to work through it. So that can be really huge in terms of just learning in a safe space how to start working with your emotions and your depression. And in some of my therapy sessions as well with my clients, is that we'll start going into the body and we start learning how to reconnect ourselves to our feelings again, how to move from head back into the heart. And so that really is this process of learning how to get in touch with these emotions again, learning how to grieve, learning how to be with an emotion with the depression and allow it to have some kind of self-expression. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing or rating this podcast if you're on Spotify, feel free to reach out to me. I am currently taking on clients one-on-one. You can schedule a call with me using the link down below. Other than that, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.